In May of 2011, city workers in Dry Hollow, Nevada, were dredging the town's main canal when a backhoe struck something solid buried in the silt. A bicycle, blue, rusted. The front basket was dented, and beneath layers of grime the words were still faintly visible. Crossway Express. That bike belonged to a woman who vanished 7 years earlier, a woman the police had quietly written off, a name the town had let fade, Camila Navarro. But the bike didn't ride itself into the canal, and Camila, she never left. She was buried. Dry Hollow wasn't the kind of town people left. It was the kind they got stuck in. One grocery store. One traffic light that blinked yellow more often than red. And a breakfast diner that hadn't changed its menu since 1982. Dry Hollow was the place you passed through on the way to somewhere else, unless you were born there, then you just stayed. Camila Navarro stayed. In 2004, she was 26, worked the morning shift for Crossway Express, a small-town courier service with 3 bikes, 5 uniforms, and a manager who still used a pager. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. And for Camila, that was enough. She was quiet, not shy, just cautious. People called her an old soul. She worked hard, kept her word, and sent half her paycheck to her mother back in El Paso, the kind of person who remembered your dog's name but never mentioned her own birthday. And at the time she disappeared, she was 4 months pregnant. November 6, 2004. It was a Saturday. Camila left her apartment just after 6:30 a.m. She wore her Crossway uniform navy polo, khaki pants, the white cap she always ironed flat. No makeup, no jewelry, just a small crossbody bag and her bike. She waved to the old lady across the hall. Left a voicemail for her younger sister, Lucia. Got the early route today. I'll call after lunch. Love you. And then she was gone. That morning, Camila never showed up at the depot. She didn't deliver the package she'd picked up the night before. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and her bike, her only means of transportation, was nowhere to be found. The next morning, Lucia stood in the sheriff's station demanding a missing persons report, but they hesitated. She's an adult, they said. Maybe she went somewhere. Pregnancy, stress, relationship troubles. Maybe she needed space. Lucia didn't buy it. Camila was 5 months away from graduating nursing school. She had doctor's appointments, bills, a plan. She didn't even own a passport. She didn't leave, Lucia said. She was taken. The sheriff's department ran a basic search. A few volunteers checked local trails. Someone brought dogs. But there was no blood. No broken lock, no tire marks, no scream, no trace, just absence. Camila Navarro, 26, 4 months, pregnant, gone. As if the ground had just opened its mouth and swallowed her whole. The town didn't talk about Camila, not after the first week, not after the local paper ran a 2-paragraph story. A 26-year-old woman, 4 months pregnant, disappeared during a Saturday morning delivery route. Police report no signs of foul play. No press conference, no extended search, no candlelight vigil, no flyers on telephone poles. People just kept living. Lucia didn't. She wasn't loud, but she remembered. She kept the final voicemail from her sister on her phone for years. Never deleted it. She switched to night shifts so she could spend her days knocking on doors along Camila's route. She even went to the county morgue and asked if any Jane Does had come in during the following weeks. There weren't. She wrote to 3 different places, a TV station, the FBI, and a non-profit that tracks missing women. Only one replied. The case lacks sufficient signs of criminal activity. Lucia started putting Camila's photo on her car, her mailbox, the laundromat corkboard. Some people told her to stop. Others whispered, maybe she wanted to disappear. Lucia didn't argue. She just paused, looked them in the eye, and said softly, "My sister isn't the kind who runs." Ben Ortega, Camila's boyfriend, said little too. At first, he looked shaken. He helped Lucia post flyers, asked questions, walked trails, but after a few weeks, his calls stopped. A few months later, he moved out of town, then came back with a new girlfriend. Her name was Jenna Hale. Life in Dry Hollow returned to normal. The blinking lights still blinked. People still drank their coffee at the same diner, chewed the same dry donuts, and talked about the weather. Only Lucia stayed the same. Every year, on the anniversary of Camila's disappearance, she walked into the sheriff's office and asked the same question. Anything new? And every year, she got the same tired stare, the same shake of the head, the same silence, thick as dust. 7 years is long enough for a disappearance to become routine. People stop saying your name, stop pretending to grieve, stop feeling guilty. Lucia no longer taped her sister's photo to the window, no longer stapled flyers to utility poles, no longer asked strangers if they saw anything that day. She still remembered, but she had learned to keep it quiet, until one morning in May 2011, everything started to shift. Chai. That spring, the city of Dry Hollow began dredging its main canal, a stretch of waterlogged concrete that hadn't been cleaned in years. Crews used backhoes to dig out the silt. One bucket struck something solid. At first, they thought it was a collapsed pipe, but when they pulled it up, it was a bicycle, rust-colored, rear wheel bent. Front basket caved in, and on the frame, almost unreadable beneath the grime, were the faded words Crossway Express. So, the news spread fast, not because the city announced it, but because someone recognized the bike. A janitor who used to work at the old Crossway Depot said, "I remember that bike. It belonged to Camila Navarro. She disappeared with it. No one ever found it. Now here it is." A week later, Lucia was called in. She took one look at the bike rusted, dripping mud, and said, "That's my sister's." No hesitation. The serial number matched. So did the aftermarket mud flaps Camila had installed herself. Even the handlebar still had that faded purple grip tape she used for better traction. Lucia asked the sheriff's department to reopen the case. They hesitated again. But the bike had been buried over a meter deep, 9 miles from where Camila vanished. It didn't drift there. There were no currents, no slope. It had been moved, dumped, hidden. A week later, the department pulled the old case file. Inside was something no one expected to survive. A security camera, tape dated the day. Camila disappeared. The tape was stored in a faded plastic case, buried at the bottom of the evidence archive. The label, handwritten in marker, was half-smudged. 11.06, 2004, Westport, rear entrance. Detectives had assumed that all footage from that year was long gone wiped when the building changed surveillance providers. But one analog unit had survived, kept offline just in case, and somehow it still worked. The footage was black and white, grainy. The camera was mounted above the rear entrance of 412 Westport Street, an old apartment building about 2 miles from where Camila was last seen. Timestamp 7:13 a.m. Camila entered the frame. Clearly, she was pushing her Crossway Express bike, the front basket tied with a brown paper parcel. She rang the bell. A woman opened the door. Only a sliver of her arm was visible, a long-sleeved dark shirt, shoulder-length hair. Camila nodded, said something, and stepped inside. She never came back out. 4 hours later, 11:21 a.m., someone else appeared. Same bike. Different person. Shorter. Wearing a hooded sweatshirt pulled tight around her head. A cloth mask covered her mouth. Her posture was stiff. Movements awkward. She wheeled the bike down the alley, walked a short distance, and then vanished from frame. That was the last time the bicycle was ever seen until it resurfaced in the canal 7 years later. Police pulled tenant records from the apartment. The package had been addressed to Unit 5B. The leaseholder, Madeline Rowe, 61, living with an adopted daughter, Jenna Rowe. The name Jenna. Lucia froze when she heard it. She'd heard that name before. Not from the case files, but from her own kitchen, just weeks earlier. Jenna Hale, Ben's new girlfriend, the woman who made her tea. The one who had asked her, "Do you ever dream about her? About Camila?" Lucia didn't believe it right away, not because she refused to, but because the name was too close, too familiar, too polite. Jenna Hale, the woman who'd once made small talk with her at the gas station, the woman who showed up to Camilla's 5-year memorial holding a bouquet of wild daisies, the woman who once poured her ginger tea and said softly, "Honestly, I get uneasy living here too. This town holds on to things too long." Lucia began to wonder. Was the woman smiling across from her the last person to see Camilla alive? She didn't tell the police. She didn't tell Ben. She just watched. Jenna lived in the south end of Dry Hollow in a rental home shared with Ben. No criminal record. No court history. On paper, she was perfectly normal, but Lucia didn't forget one thing. The package Camilla delivered the day she vanished was addressed to Unit 5B, 412 Westport Street. Jenna once lived there. That was the door Camilla walked into and never came back from. Lucia returned to the old apartment building. It had changed owners. Unit 5B now belonged to an elderly couple. They knew nothing. But the new manager, out of habit, still kept a folder of old tenant forms. Lucia flipped it open. The first rental entry read, Jenna Rowe, age 19. Occupation, unknown. Relationship, adopted daughter. Lucia went cold. Rowe. Madeline Rowe, the adoptive mother. The woman who signed for the package that day. The woman who opened the door for Camila. The woman who disappeared from town just a month after Camila did. Lucia brought everything to the sheriff's office, every page, every record. She asked them to bring Jenna in for questioning. They refused. There's no direct evidence, no grounds for a warrant. We can't act on suspicion alone. Lucia didn't argue. She just stared at the officer, voice low and steady. If you won't act, I will. Lucia didn't call the police. She no longer believed in their investigation, and she certainly didn't believe in polite refusals, pitying looks, or the words, "Just let it go." That day, she went alone. House number 18 on Marlowe Street was unremarkable. An old car sat in the driveway, plastic flower baskets hung neatly under the eaves, white door, scratched handle, curtains slightly open, the soft sound of boiling water from the kitchen. No yelling, no chaos. Everything looked ordinary. Lucia knocked. She already knew who would answer. Attend. Inside, the scent of ginger tea. Polished wooden floors, a framed photo of Ben on the wall. Next to it, an older photo blurred, faded, but the eyes inside that frame weren't unfamiliar. Not to Lucia. She didn't need a confession. She hadn't come to interrogate. She came to see, to confirm what her gut had known for years. In that kitchen, she saw everything. A lidded porcelain urn, a monogrammed hand towel, CN, a photo tucked behind a row of books, a medical file with patient info carefully erased. No one needed to say a word. No one had to point. Lucia knew. Camila never left this house. She had been here all along, only no one had looked long enough to see. Lucia walked out, carrying the only thing she could take, a small square of foil wrapped around a dark strand of hair pressed between pages of an old Bible, enough to reopen a case, enough to bury the lies. The next day, Jenna was taken away on a stretcher. No resistance. She didn't speak, not one word in her own defense. Ben stood at the gate, watching. He didn't ask Lucia what she'd found. And for the first time in 7 years, Lucia didn't need to ask anything either. 3 days after Jenna's arrest, police searched the house on 18 Marlowe. They found a white ceramic urn. Inside, human remains. DNA tests confirmed the match Camila Navarro. There was no longer any doubt. She had died, and for 7 years her ashes had been kept in the same house where Lucia once sat, drank tea, and talked, no more than 10 meters away. Beside the urn was a locked drawer. Inside, detectives found a small black notebook, a handwritten list in red ink for names, one of them Camila's, and an unsent letter scrawled in uneven handwriting. I don't know why I did it, but if they find out what I've done, I'll be left behind too, just like Camila. The letter wasn't signed, but every clue pointed to the same person. Lucia didn't attend the first hearing. She didn't care if Jenna confessed or denied, if she stood in court 1 time or 50. What Lucia needed, she already had. An urn, a name confirmed, a closing line, Chum. The burial was held in the backyard of their mother's home in El Paso. No music, no priest. Just Lucia, an elderly neighbor, and a single empty chair. Ben's chair. He didn't come. Lucia didn't cry. She simply stood there, holding a photo of Camila, and whispered softly, "You're home now. This time, you're really home." Dry Hollow didn't hold a press conference. There was no formal apology, no handwritten note from city officials to the Navarro family, but people started looking at each other differently. Tinty, the woman who ran the corner store, the one who once said maybe she left on her own. She began lighting candles every night in her storefront window. The sheriff took extended leave, then quietly resigned. His name no longer hung outside the station. People stopped calling Jenna Ben's girlfriend. They stopped saying her name at all. Ben moved away the following spring, left no message. Lucia didn't look for him. She just mailed him a photo, Camila's ashes being lowered into real earth for the first time. Ordinaire. Lucia went back to courier work for a few months. Not for money, but because every street she biked down, every gate she passed, every hill she climbed, felt like Camila was still there, in the wind, in the gravel under her tires, in her breath. 7 years is too long to wait for justice, but it's never too late to stop being silent. Not everyone commits murder, but everyone gets to choose whether they look away, and it was that silence, the shared, complicit silence, that kept Camila in the dark for so long. Qu'est-ce qui? Lucia used to ask, "If I stop looking, who else will?" Now she knows the answer. No one. That's why I never stopped. The end of a story isn't when the truth comes out. It's when no one dares bury it again.